And even the Ndebele in Zimbabwe, when Mzilikazi came, he came with those Abasenkla, who are the core, who are the Kumalos, the Mabenas, the Masukus, and who are the real core, hardcore Zulus kind of mindset.
Is that where the animosity or the tension between the Shonas and the Ndebeles come from?
It's deep. That's where it sits. That even when Nkomo was now trying to negotiate with Mugabe, the hardcore Ndebeles actually called him a seller. This weak nation, this Amashona, this Amashina, these weak people are now in power. And they say, but no, Zimbabwe, this is our history. This is our land. In as much as Lobengula negotiated with Sisi John Rhodes and the rest to rewrite the narrative, but now we want to rewrite the narrative.
Welcome back on the channel. I'm your host Nati. Today we have Joshua Maponga on the channel. If you are new in the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Let's go.
How's the family? How are the children?
Man, I've shedded more than 5 kgs.
I can see you've lost some weight. You're looking good.
I walked up Mount Kenya 14 kilometers.
Yeah.
Carrying 20 kgs on my back. Slept in a cave, to the Mau cave at the foot of Mount Kenya. Bathed in some sacred pools there, sacred waters, and burnt some elephant dung for mosquitoes and bride meat the Maasai way. You just take a drumstick or a leg of a whole goat and put a stick into it, and then you make it sit on the fire like that, and you spin it every 15, 20 minutes, and man, it was messy. But we've always known, as Africans, that we cannot be talking about corruption of 5 million when actually the money on the table is more than 100 billion. And Africans are fighting over morsels of change, as it were, the crumbs of bread, and the real corrupt people are the financial institutions of this world, the insurance companies of this world, the military gun manufacturers of this world, the Soros guys, the Rothschild people, who are sitting on top of the food chain, controlling the politics of the world, deciding who goes into power. And that's where the real mother of corruption is happening. And what we see at the bottom there, a guy being given a car, being given a small little villa to live in France, and some small little loose change dumped into a Mauritius account and some Swiss account, Virgin Islands account. And then the whole African continent goes in shock to say there's some corruption. I mean, who speaks about the 890 billion worth of export smuggled materials and resources that are leaving African borders every year? Who speaks about that? Corruption. Who speaks about the diamonds that are disappearing in Congo, in Zimbabwe, and in Namibia? Where are they going? And who is eating all these voluminous types of monies? And they're bringing in guns. They give us guns to kill each other. They take the minerals and they go to their own countries. So yes, Zimbabwe, we're doing fine, but not very African liberation heroes. Zimbabwe being one of them, South Africa being one of them, Zambia being one of them, and all of them. Straight from war. Straight from war. With your clothes still dripping with blood. And your gun is still dripping with blood. Straight from war into your bedroom. Straight from war into a government office. Straight from war into operation. And then we wonder why there is so much madness amongst the military people. Drunkenness, substance abuse, and worse still, the psychological imbalances that we witness amongst the military people, to an extent that some of them have become literal criminals. Literal criminals. Because the criminality that they were trained to do, if it cannot function, what do? Then if we walk around South Africa, here's some of the biggest hastes that are happening in the country, and proper militarized strategies of robbing banks and etc. It's coming from the military section, including Zimbabwean soldiers, Tswana soldiers, South African soldiers, who know each other from training camps in Mozambique, in Tanzania. They call each other, what's up, nothing's happening, man, and we're poor here with no money. So this element for me remains And all of a sudden, these war veterans want to walk around and say, we liberated the country. And I look them straight in the eye and say, which country did you liberate? Because the common people, that's where the war was fought. The Smith regime did not trust us because these were their children. The liberation heroes did not trust us because they say we're sellouts to the other side. So you find that lots of sellouts were killed. That is on its way to recovery. And I think that this political conversation has just been wrapped up under lots of bandages. And every time they feel like it's smelling again, add more bandages and put some perfume around it. But at the bottom of that are unresolved social issues. And even the Ndebele in Zimbabwe, when Mzilikazi came, he came with those Abase Nkla, who are the core, who are the Kumalos, the Mabenas, the Masukus, and who are the real core, hardcore Zulus. When they came to KwaNdebele, then they included the other tribes, Boskosana, who are Ndebeles, then they included the Tswanas. And then when they came to Zimbabwe, the local people, they call them Mamahole, which are the dirty ones.
Okay.
So even in their own hierarchy, they already had some segregative Zulu deep-seated undermining of other nations that we cannot be ruled by Izluanyana. That kind of mindset.
Is that where the animosity or the tension between the Shonas and the Ndebeles come from?
It's deep. That's where it sits. That even when Nkomo was now trying to negotiate with Mugabe, the hardcore Ndebeles actually called him a sellout because now he's negotiating with a weaker race. They cannot be ruled by a weaker race. You cannot come to a country where you find other people living, and because of your military power at that moment, you think that you can overshadow the entire politics and rewrite it to fulfill your own bigotry of where you're coming from with your ethnic superiority of another nation. Now, this weak nation, this Amashona, this Amashina, these weak people are now in power. And they say, but no, Zimbabwe, this is our history. This is our land. In as much as Lobengula negotiated with Sisi John Rhodes and the rest to rewrite the narrative, but now we want to rewrite that narrative ourselves and tell you exactly what happened. That whole story, the whole of Matebele, don't want that story to be spoken. They only want to talk about Gukurahundi going that way. But no one wants to talk about before Gukurahundi, what happened and what could have been. I'm not saying it's the only cause. What could have been some of the precipitating factors that caused the Gukurahundi? Of course, Zipra is involved, which is the Ndebele side, which was sponsored partly by the Ndebele, but by the British, which was a way of controlling the ZANU-PF. And except so you already have the international playing into that space. And the Zipra soldiers were much more better trained than the ZANLA, than the Zimbabwe National Army, the ZANU people. And in the midst of that tension, when ZANU went into power, whether the ZANU-PF went into power by the British help also, because when Mugabe was released from prison, he was sent to Mozambique, escorted by the MI16, by the British, and put there to run ZANU-PF, not as one of the ZANU-PF leaders, but actually as an infiltration of the British government, not trusting Tongogara, who was a radical like Chris Hani. So they said, no, if this one gets into power, Zim will not do well. So now we must also look at ZANU-PF in the eyes and say, but who killed Chitepo? It was ZANU-PF leaders who are there right now in Zimbabwe. Who killed Tongogara? It was ZANU-PF, with the assistance, of course, of the outsiders. And they're still there in power. So by the time Mugabe comes into power, he's not coming truly as a legitimate ZANU-PF leader, but also as a default. I cannot speak much about South African politics because I'm here. But you find that this element of swinging a more sober, neutral person to take over power rather than the far left, which did not want to compromise, the Joe Slovos, the Chris Hanis, you can mention all those people that really died in the prisons and etc., who were not tolerating vis-a-vis those that were allowed to rule because they were tolerating. So are we going to be looking at African politics constantly working with those that tolerate oppression or the legitimacy of those that really want change for their people? So what went wrong? It's not what went wrong. It is this default that we are looking at where those that went into power are the milder version of the real cries and the pains of the people. And it's not only Zimbabwe. SWAPO is the same thing. Botswana is the same thing. South Africa is the same thing. Zambia is the same thing. And Zimbabwe falls in the same space. So we have a more sanitized government that does not want to deal with African problems, economic problems, where the EFF and the MKs are coming in to say, but this thing is not working. And it will not work until Africans begin to take the Donald Trump position. America comes first. And we must also say, like Trump, Africa comes first. So what has happened? Our military generals, with the government instruments in their hands, have become the sole beneficiaries of the economic system to benefit themselves and their families and their comrades and etc. And at the core of this, today I'm speaking on behalf of the common people who fought for the liberation of the country, on whose backs and wombs and stomachs the war was fought, who are now being neglected, while we see the opulence of a few politically connected people looting state assets into
Yes, that was Joshua Maponga explaining the African history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. See you on the next one. Let's go.